One of the most difficult things to do when investing, either for the short term or the long term, is deciding where to put your money and what to invest in. With new ETFs coming out all the time, it can be difficult to decide which ones are best for you. So today, I'm going to share with you whether you are saving for retirement or you're saving in a taxable account, what are the best Vanguard ETFs. You're not going to want to miss this. So you heard right, Vanguard has some of the best ETFs out there, whether you're saving in a retirement account or you're saving in a taxable brokerage account. But real quick, before we get into what is an ETF and what are the best Vanguard ETFs, be sure to give this video a like. When you hit that little thumbs up button, it really helps spread the word and I really appreciate it, so thanks. All right, well, let's start with the basics. What is an ETF? As soon as people hear those three letters, they start to get a little confused. And trust me, there's a lot of terms out there when you're trying to save and invest your money. Well, the letters ETF stand for Exchange Traded Fund. Now, all that really means is that an ETF is something that you can buy. It's a type of security and it tracks something. It could track an index, it could track a commodity, it could track an entire sector. So based on where you want to put your money, you would buy that type of ETF. Now, what's really cool about ETFs is that they trade in real time, just like stocks. So if the price goes up or the price goes down, you can buy or sell at any time. However, unlike stocks, it's actually a bundle of funds. So your risk goes down compared to maybe if you were just buying one specific stock. Now, in a lot of ways, this sort of works the same as an index fund. In fact, I've made a video all about the best Vanguard index funds that you can invest in. However, many people prefer ETFs because, like I said before, they trade in real time. So you can buy them or sell them so long as the market is open. Whereas with index funds, they're only bought or sold at the end of the trading day. All right, now let's get into our Vanguard ETFs good. The answer, in my opinion, is absolutely yes. Now, just to be clear, they're not the only game in town for low-cost investing options. Other companies like Fidelity, T. Rowe Price, Charles Schwab, they all have similar ETFs. However, my personal favorite is Vanguard. For example, both of my young children have their own custodial Roth IRAs at Vanguard, and inside them we hold ETFs. Just to name a few reasons why, there is a very low minimum. For example, if you have enough money to buy just one ETF, you can buy that one ETF. Also, there's very low fees. In a couple minutes, we'll talk about something called an expense ratio, and that's going to be the fee or cost that you pay for having a specific ETF. And they are so low, some of the lowest around, that it's essentially free investing. Also, speaking of free investing, Vanguard has $0 commission trades for ETFs online. Back in the day, they used to kind of charge a little fee every time you bought or sold, and now they don't charge a fee at all. And the last thing I'll say is just diversification. There are so many different ETFs out there. I'm only going to name a few today. However, Vanguard offers a variety of different types of ETFs. So whatever you're looking for, you can probably find something that's going to satisfy your investing needs. So now that we have a basic understanding about what ETFs are and why Vanguard is a great place to buy them, let's dive into the best ones for retirement accounts. Now, just to be clear, a retirement account is considered long-term investing. There is typically an age restriction for you to access the funds, typically 59 and a half. So the younger you start investing, the longer the money has to grow and compound, and this will hopefully be the money that you live off of when you finally retire. Keeping that in mind, some people prefer to be a little bit riskier in a retirement account because this money has so long to grow. It could be decades before you're ever going to touch it. Therefore, you might prefer to invest in ETFs that might be more full of stocks as opposed to a little bit more balanced and diversified. Of course, the closer you get to actual retirement age, it is very common for people to move their ETFs, that asset allocation, to something that is a little bit more conservative and balanced. Keeping all that in mind, let's dive into my top 5 Vanguard ETFs for retirement accounts. Many of you out there already know what I'm going to say for this first one. It is VTI. That is Vanguard's Total Stock Market ETF. The reason this ETF is so popular is that it tracks the entire US stock market. So when you buy one share, you're getting a small piece of over 3,600 US companies. For this reason, VTI is extremely popular with over $200 billion in assets. And just like the name says, this is an all equities ETF, so it's 100% stocks. That makes it great for long-term investing, and there is an expense ratio of 0.03%. Up next, we have VOO. That is Vanguard's S&P 500 ETF. VOO tracks the S&P 500, meaning you own a small piece of all of the top 500 companies in the United States. Of course, some people like owning the total stock market, VTI. Others like to sort of track the S&P 500, just those top 500. So for this reason, VOO is almost as popular with a total amount of assets of $180 billion. And again, it's a great choice for long-term investing because it's all equities and it has the exact same expense ratio of 0.03%. Moving on, let's go international with VT, that is Vanguard's Total World Stock ETF. Now, because VT invests in the global stock market, some consider it a little bit more risky than the other two that I just mentioned. However, I personally like having a portion of my portfolio in international stocks. So I think it's a great choice for long-term retirement investing. And VT has a slightly higher expense ratio of 0.08%. Up next, we have VYM. Now, this is Vanguard's high yield dividend ETF. Some folks just love having dividends, especially in a retirement account. So this ETF invests in domestic companies with a long history of paying out dividends. Now, if you're familiar with that term dividend, but you just can't remember how it works, picture this. About 4 times a year, once per quarter, these companies pay out profit sharing, some of the earnings, and you receive them in the form of dividends. So what's really cool is you're getting a share of the profits, and over time, of course, hopefully these companies grow as well. The current yield for VYM is just over 3%, but of course that can go up and down, and the expense ratio is 0.06%. Oh, and I didn't want to leave out a bond ETF. You know, when you have a retirement portfolio, usually people like to increase that bond portion a little bit as they get closer to retiring. So my favorite Vanguard ETF that is full of bonds is BND. This is Vanguard's Total Bond Market ETF, and it consists of government and corporate bonds. Now, bonds work very differently than stocks. Typically, they have a lower yield, but people consider them much more safe and less risky. So it might be a good idea to hold a portion of your portfolio in bonds to help reduce the volatility of having those equity ETFs. And the expense ratio for BND is 0.035%, so pretty low. So I could stop the video right there. Those are some great ETFs for your retirement account, but what happens when that bucket's all full? What about a taxable brokerage account? I have a few to share with you for those types of accounts, because in that taxable account, you paid the government taxes on this money, so you want to maximize your long-term growth while minimizing any additional taxes that you're going to have to pay. Therefore, the next few ETFs that I'm going to mention would probably be best in a taxable brokerage account. Each of them offer their own tax advantages, but they all have the potential for some long-term growth as well. Up first is VUG, that's Vanguard's Growth ETF. It has very low, if any, dividend yield whatsoever, and it consists mostly of large cap stocks. This way you can hold it long term and not be worried about paying any unnecessary taxes. For that reason, some people like VUG even better than VTI, but you're going to have to decide for yourself. The expense ratio is 0.04%. Moving on, we have VTEB, that is Vanguard's tax-exempt bond ETF. Now, the reason it's tax-exempt is because it invests in municipal bonds. So oftentimes that type of investment is exempt from federal, state, and local taxes. So yeah, the benefit of this ETF is that it is tax exempt. However, because it invests in bonds, the yield is typically going to be very low. Also, it has an expense ratio of 0.06%. Another option might be VGIT. This is Vanguard's intermediate term treasury ETF. So this is composed of treasury bonds, which are typically exempt from some local and state taxes. And there's usually a lower correlation between the stock market and treasury bonds. Therefore, if you have other investments that are like 100% equity, then you could use something like VGIT to kind of hedge against those other types of investments. Also, the expense ratio is 0.05%. A couple of key takeaways. Vanguard has some of the best ETFs out there. However, which ones you actually should invest in really comes down to if you're thinking about a retirement account or more of that taxable brokerage account. Sometimes that money has more time to grow in a retirement account, and with that taxable account, it may be money that you might have to draw from maybe like sooner than later, maybe the next like 5 to 10 years. For those reasons, it's always a good idea for you to decide how risky you want to go, all equities or stocks, a little mix of stocks and bonds. It really depends on your tolerance for that risk and a lot of times how close you are to actually needing to access the money. Also, I will mention that you can buy all of these ETFs directly through Vanguard. You don't have to go through any intermediary at all. However, M1 Finance also has access to these ETFs, and I gotta say, I really like their mobile app and their customer experience a bit better than Vanguard. In some ways, Vanguard just keeps everything so lean and the fees are so low that sometimes they're still playing catch up with things like their website or their app. So if you are interested in taking a look at M1 Finance, I personally have a few pies with them, and I'll leave a link down below in the description to M1. I did throw a ton of letters and numbers your way, so I will drop a link down below in the description of this video to my website so you can check this out. I'll even make a little chart of all the ETFs that I named and the expense ratios associated with each one. Also, if you haven't already, be sure to like this video. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. All right, as always, I'm Rich, and until next time.